Comedian Dave Chappelle is making headlines for his latest Netflix special called The Closer. Chappelle has had a long history of including LGBTQ plus jokes in his stand-up comedy, and despite calls for him to be canceled, Dave has not backed down. According to TheHollywoodReporter.com, some Netflix employees are saying enough is enough. They're boycotting and even quitting their jobs in protest as they demand his comedy special be removed from the streaming platform. So, should Dave continue to push back, or does he deserve the backlash? You ladies all saw it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I watched it late last night, and
What
I
were
was
your
so
thoughts?
happy I did, because when I first, when you see clips, you don't get the full
Yeah.
Exactly,
scope of
exactly.
everything. Dave Chappelle, we know is controversial. Dave Chappelle has a lot of money in the bank. He can be free. A young comic wouldn't get away with some of the things that he says, but he can do it. And in watching it, the entire thing, he's not saying anything horrible. If you listen to him, there is a young trans woman that he meets, he encounters along the way, and befriends her, and now is raising money for her kids to go to college. Like, when you watch the whole thing, it's not offensive to me, just my opinion, right? But what I have to say is, don't boycott Netflix. If you wanna not hear what Dave Chappelle has to say, okay, then choose not to. But I feel like we are losing our opinions in society now. You can't have an opinion because everybody has to be the same. And I feel like that's where the problem lies for me. It is his opinion. You don't like it, don't watch it. But I don't think you need to cancel him because of your opinion, because if it's his opinion.
I think that Dave Chappelle is a hell of a comedian. I think he is letting his ego ruin his comedy legacy by marginalizing and joking about marginalized groups. If you take what he was saying about the transgender and put another marginalized group in there with jokes, I know I would feel different if he said jokes about fat black women, or if he said jokes about Jews, or if he said something about marginalized groups. And I think that's what the issue. Because I've done our specials, I understand what he was trying to do, and he made some valid points. It was just that if he could have taken out the transgender jokes and really just talked about it, because this is the real issue, is that transgender people are being killed in just the numbers, and they can't walk the streets. And it's like, I think that a lot of us aren't understanding. We don't understand the transgender lifestyle. We think that it's shame. We think that and it's a lot of things that's happening that we have to evolve. And I think he has evolved, because at the very end of his set, he says, I will no longer do these jokes until we sit down and we talk about it. And I was happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I appreciated the honesty, which is exactly what you're saying. I appreciated the honesty and watching him evolve, even within his storytelling.
Yes.
His storytelling literally explains that he met this person, how he initially felt, which I think some people can relate to, in the sense of if you're just not familiar, you know what I mean? And then he talks about meeting this person. But I do want to talk about the family of Daphne Dorman, who he talks about, the late transgender comedian, who Dave Chappelle actually highlights in the comedy special.
And gave her lots of chances to open up for him.
The family of Daphne Dorman actually say that he's an LGBTQ ally and that he meant the world to her. So I think it is interesting to see how he evolved through his relationship with this transgender person. How initially he may have felt a certain way, and then through getting to, which is what we always say here about how there's so many times that we judge things based on what we don't know. And I actually think this opens people's eyes who may have a similar opinion to Dave Chappelle, who may be like, wait, what is this? And then they actually, if you listen to the whole story, you hear how then he changed his mind and he actually
But that's just one person, though.
Yeah.
That's just one.
Yeah, and the
Well,
problem
it starts with one.
The problem I have with the special, first of all, I love Dave Chappelle. I think he's brilliant. And I also love that he actually makes it a sport to challenge his audiences about really uncomfortable topics. Gender, sexual orientation, and race. The problem for me that was cringy is he gave very misinformed punchlines that can really create damaging, lasting effects, as they already have, towards the marginalized communities. One thing he did is he basically made an overall comparison of the struggle over oppression and assumed that that with some gay people, they have access to white privilege in America, And that kind of invalidates their concerns and the stereotypes. Let me make this clear about a few facts that we should just know. Black transgender people have an extremely high unemployment rate at 26%. 41% of transgender people have actually experienced homelessness. 34% of Black transgender people live in extreme poverty, making less than $10K a year. And 49% of Black transgender people reported having attempted suicide. Wow. And not to mention, LGBTQ people are 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization, including rape and sexual assault, more than non-LGBTQ people.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Me too. I'm glad that this brings awareness to this.
My point is that his jokes ignored the fact that there's a huge population of non-white gay people who face oppression for both of their sexual orientation. And another big fact that I was floored by when he kind of just overlooked is he gave an example of misinformation when he slammed the Me Too movement by calling it like a silly bunch of white women who are privileged, should fire their agents or stand outside the Oscars in black dresses. Actually, the Me Too movement was created by a Black woman named Tarana Burke, who not only was a sexual assault survivor, but she worked for 3 decades, you guys, to get Me Too movement known and to be justified, and to also speak specifically for the most unheard voices in America, Black women and girls. So we don't just kind of make a joke and give it that lasting impression that people walk away with without dismissing the work that people have that say in order just to get their voice out there. So I want to say this really quick, though. I think that if you do care about the state of the world and the people that live here, it should be in your conscience to think about the lasting impact that your art leaves, right? If you want to be that type of comic that, you know, gives racist jokes and super homophobic jokes so you can pave the way for other people to do that, that is your right. You have that right to do that. But if you see yourself as someone who empathizes with oppressed groups, then your art becomes very confusing. And that's what I was left with at the end.
Well, but he was doing some points where he said you have a transgender white male and 1 minute they're transgender, but then when it comes to the racial issues, they become white. And I think that's what a lot of Black people kind of related to and said, wait, now I can understand his point on that. Your point is so valid about just the racial issues that he was talking about.
That he's
even about
the voices of the non-white community that are gay or trans.
Well, that's why it's a fascinating thing to talk about. Go ahead.
It really is. I'm wondering, though, if he was saying it somewhere else, would it be okay? Like, you do comedy, you do stand-up. Are you nervous now because anything you say could be construed as horrible? Like, is that changing comedy? I'm not taking away from anything you said. Everything you said
I
is
feel like if you ain't saying horrible things, then you ain't saying horrible things.
Just saying,
it's actually not
does
horrible.
that change
It should
comedy,
be truth.
though?
It should be truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is with comedy, and what he was saying, he kept saying in the special, was that we usually don't punch down. And we don't punch down to marginalized groups. We always punch up at comedy. So that's why you know, back in the day, you had all the white jokes. Like, white people this, because we can punch up on them.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is, and that's where a lot of people felt like he was punching down on the transgender community. And that's just something that in history we normally don't do in comedy. For some reason, I think he's mixing up the genders, he's mixing up the racial aspect.
He's grouping
it's
them
a
together
lot
as one color.
that you have to process
in
that comedy special.
My favorite thing he said, though, my favorite thing was when he shared the tweet that every human being is basically just saying, I'm trying to live my
life.
That's it.
I'm trying to live my life.
Did you feel like that was an evolving moment for him?
Yes.
Like him getting to that
was
place?
a very human statement that we all need to register when it comes to classifying people, judging people, you included. You are all just trying to live your experience. So make space for people to have that.
And can I say that I met Daphne when we were up at Cobb's.
You did?
Yes. Lovely woman. Oh. And I'm just so happy that he did do that wonderful tribute to her. And we're just going to keep evolving and learning about it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad he's saying he's not going to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.